My stepfather thinks he owns the house I inherited from my late dad and decided to set his own rules in it. So, I kicked him and his kids out, but my mom left with them. Now they are demanding to share my property. I'm Selena, a 21-year-old college student, and I live in our beautiful family estate. Well, technically my estate now. My father left it to me when he passed away 3 years ago from a sudden cardiac arrest. I was only 18 then, just starting college, when we got that devastating call. 1 minute dad was fine, the next he was gone. It still hurts to think about it. The house is gorgeous. It's the kind of place that makes people stop and stare when they drive by. 2 stories of elegant architecture, perfectly manicured lawns, and a kitchen that would make any chef jealous. I live here with my mom, who's 48. Dad made sure she'd be taken care of too, leaving her a monthly allowance of $3,000 for life. She surprised me with how calmly she accepted everything. No arguments, no complaints about me getting the house. She just smiled and said Dad knew what he was doing. That's one of the things I've always loved about my mom. Her ability to handle difficult situations with grace. We settled into a comfortable routine after Dad's passing. Mom and I became even closer, if that was possible. She'd cook my favorite breakfast every morning. We'd talk about my classes, share stories about our days. Everything was good. Well, at least I thought it was. That's why what happened a few months ago hit me like a ton of bricks. I came home from my afternoon classes to find Mom standing in our foyer with a man I'd never seen before and 2 boys. "Selena, honey," Mom said, her voice unnaturally high. "I'd like you to meet John, my husband." I stood there frozen. Husband? I must have looked like a fish out of water, opening and closing my mouth without any words coming out. "We got married yesterday," she continued, as if she was telling me she'd bought new curtains. John was younger than Mom. I'd later learn he was 6 years younger, and his 2 sons aged 12-14 stood behind him. But what really got to me wasn't just the shock of Mom remarrying. It was the fact that she hadn't told me she was even dating someone. No hints, no conversations, nothing. Just surprise, here's your new stepfather and stepbrothers. I watched in stunned silence as John walked around our house, my house, inspecting everything like he was a potential buyer at an open house. He ran his hands along the mahogany banisters, peered into every room, and nodded approvingly at the high ceilings. "This is even better than the pictures," he said, grinning. "We're going to enjoy living here." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl, but I pushed the feeling aside. After all, when we sat down to talk that first day, John seemed okay. Not exactly warm, but not terrible either. He asked about my studies, made a few jokes that weren't completely awful, and managed to keep his sons quiet for at least an hour. This could work. I remember thinking to myself, maybe we could actually get along. That illusion of potential harmony lasted exactly 2 days. Then all hell broke loose. "Give it back, it's my turn." "Jake," the 12-year-old screamed at the top of his lungs. "No way, I just started." His 14-year-old brother, Mike, shouted back. And there they went again, wrestling over my laptop like it was the last piece of technology on Earth. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was my new daily reality. These boys fought over everything. The TV remote, the last cookie, who got to sit in which chair, even who got to use the bathroom first in the morning. One particularly memorable afternoon, I was trying to study for a crucial law exam. The chapter on constitutional rights required complete concentration, and I had just gotten into a good rhythm when crash. The door to my room flew open, and in tumbled Jake and Mike, a tangled mess of flying fists and accusations. "Get out!" I yelled, jumping up from my desk. "This is my room." "He took the controller when I was winning," Jake whined. "You weren't even playing right," Mike shot back. They continued their brawl, knocking over my carefully organized study materials. My constitutional law textbook hit the floor with a thud, pages bending under its own weight. "Dad," I heard Mike yell, "Jake's cheating again." John sauntered up to my doorway, leaning against the frame with that infuriating smirk of his. "Come on, Selena, they're just figuring things out." This is how young men learn to handle conflict. By destroying my room and interrupting my studies? I asked incredulously. Mom appeared behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "John's right, honey. The boys are just being boys. They need to learn to work out their differences." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Every day, it was the same thing. Constant fighting, screaming, things getting broken. And apparently, this was all perfectly fine with their father, and increasingly with my mother, but John wasn't done making changes. One evening, he gathered everyone in the living room for what he called a family meeting. He stood in the center of the room, hands on his hips, surveying the space like a general planning a battle. "This house needs some serious work," he announced. "Everything's too feminine. We need to renovate. New furniture, new color scheme, the works." I sat up straighter. "Excuse me? Look at all this," he gestured around. "The floral patterns, the pastel colors, it's like living in a dollhouse. We need something more masculine, more befitting a proper family home." "This is my house," I said firmly, feeling my blood pressure rise. "Dad left it to me, not to Mom, and definitely not to you. I'll decide if anything needs to be changed." John's face darkened. "Listen, Selena, ownership is just a technicality. What matters is who lives here and who's the head of the family, and is the man of the house." I stood up from the couch. "Let me make something very clear. You don't command anything in this house. You live here because you're my mother's husband, and your sons are here only because I allow it." The change in John's face was instant, like a mask dropping away. His eyes narrowed, and that fake pleasant smile disappeared completely. In 3 quick strides, he was standing right in front of me, using his height to try to intimidate me. "Listen here, you spoiled little princess," he snarled, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I won't have some college kid telling me what I can and can't do in my own home." "It's not your home," I repeated, standing my ground even as my heart raced. "And it never will be." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. John's face turned an alarming shade of red, and he raised his hand, taking a swing toward me. The movement was so sudden that Mom gasped from across the room, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up, my finger hovering over the emergency call button. "Go ahead," I said, my voice ice cold. "Give me a reason to call the police. I'm sure they'd be very interested in hearing about a man threatening his stepdaughter in her own home." The threat worked like a bucket of cold water. John's hand dropped immediately, and without another word, he turned and stormed up the stairs, leaving Mom and me alone in the living room. "Selena, honey." Mom rushed forward, her voice trembling. "There's no need for things to get so heated. John is just trying to adjust to our family dynamic. He needs time to get used to everything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she seriously defending him after what just happened? "He needs to feel like a real man," Mom continued, wringing her hands. "Like the head of the house. You know how important that is for men, sweetie. Please try to understand." I looked at my mother's pleading face, trying to recognize the strong, sensible woman who had raised me. The whole situation was surreal. My mother, who had always been so level-headed, was now standing here making excuses for a man who had just tried to hit me. Something inside me snapped. I was done trying to be diplomatic. "You want to know what I think?" I raised my voice deliberately, making sure my words would carry upstairs. "When he earns enough money to buy his own house, he can make whatever rules he wants there. But this," I gestured around at the home my father had left me. "This isn't his house to command." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from upstairs, we heard heavy footsteps followed by a violent bang. The sound of John slamming the bedroom door was so forceful it made the chandelier in the living room shake. After the confrontation with John, things in the house changed, but not in the dramatic way I'd expected. It started with breakfast. For as long as I could remember, mornings had been our special time. Mom would be in the kitchen by 7, humming softly while she worked her magic at the stove. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and whatever delicious creation she was making would drift up to my room better than any alarm clock. But now? Now the kitchen was silent in the mornings. The first time it happened, I thought maybe Mom had slept in. I came downstairs in my usual morning daze, expecting to smell coffee and breakfast, only to find an empty kitchen. The stove was cold, the coffee maker amused. Through the dining room window, I could see Mom in the garden, having coffee with John. I made myself some toast and tried not to think too much of it. Everyone's entitled to a morning off, right? But it happened again the next day. And the next. Soon, a week had passed, and the only sounds in the morning kitchen were the ones I made myself, fumbling around for cereal or bread. One morning, I finally worked up the courage to ask about it. I found Mom in the living room, reading a magazine, while John's boys argued over some video game in the background. "Mom," I started hesitantly, "is everything okay? You haven't been cooking breakfast lately." She looked up from her magazine, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Regret, maybe? But it was quickly replaced by a cool detachment I'd never seen before. "Selena, you're 21 now," she said, her voice matter of fact. "You're an adult and perfectly capable of making your own breakfast. Besides," she gestured around, "this is your house, remember? You're the lady of the house now, so you should learn to take care of yourself." The words hit me like a slap. But I swallowed the hurt and nodded, not wanting to start another argument. The tension in the house was already thick enough to cut with a knife. I turned and walked away, pretending I didn't see John's smirk from where he sat in Dad's old armchair. As the days went by, I noticed other changes too. Mom's monthly allowance, the money Dad had left to ensure she'd always be comfortable, seemed to be disappearing faster than ever. I started seeing shopping bags from expensive stores appearing in the foyer. John had developed a sudden taste for fine dining, and every other night, they'd dress up and head out to the fanciest restaurants in town. "We're trying that new French place downtown," Mom would announce, pulling on her coat while John waited by the door. Don't wait up. I knew these restaurants, the kind where appetizers cost more than a week's worth of groceries. And every time they went out, it was Mom reaching for her purse when the bill came. My father's money, carefully set aside to take care of her, was now funding romantic dinners with a man who had tried to hit his stepdaughter just weeks ago. The fancy restaurant dates weren't enough apparently. Soon, Mom and John started taking weekend trips together. It started with romantic getaways to nearby bed and breakfasts, then evolved into longer excursions to beach resorts and mountain lodges. But their latest travel plan really took the cake. "Selena, we need to talk," Mom said one evening, catching me as I was heading up to my room to study. Her voice had that fake sweet tone she'd started using whenever she wanted something from me. "John and I are planning a romantic getaway next week. Just a few days. And we need you to watch the boys while we're gone." I actually laughed out loud thinking she was joking, but when I saw her serious expression, my laughter died in my throat. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Have you seen how they behave? They're like wild animals." Right on cue, a crash echoed from upstairs, followed by screaming. Mom winced but pressed on. "They're just active boys." "Active?" I cut her off. "They're dangerous. They could literally kill each other, and I'm not going to be responsible for that. What if one of them cracks the other's skull open during one of their fights? What if they break bones?" "No way, Mom. Please, Selena," she begged, grabbing my hand. "John and I really need this time together. We've been planning this trip for weeks." I pulled my hand away. "Then take them with you. Or better yet, leave them with John's mother. She only lives 15 minutes away." "Oh, she's too old to handle them," Mom said quickly. "And I'm too young," I shot back. "Besides, I have plans that week. I have a study group, assignments due." The argument went on for another hour, with Mom alternating between guilt trips and promises that the boys would behave, but I stood my ground. In the end, they had no choice but to take Jake and Mike with them. The morning they left, you'd think someone had died from the looks on their faces. John stomped around loading suitcases into the car, scowling like I'd personally ruined his life. Mom barely said goodbye, just gave me a disappointed look that was supposed to make me feel guilty. The house felt wonderfully peaceful after they left, but their sour attitudes had become the new normal. Every day it was the same thing. John and Mom walking around with faces like thunder, sighing heavily and exchanging meaningful looks whenever I entered a room. It was like they were competing in some sort of most miserable person contest. Meanwhile, the boys continued their daily warfare. Just yesterday, they'd had a full-on brawl over who got to use the TV first, complete with pushing, shoving, and enough screaming to wake the dead. And Mom? She barely even looked up from her phone. As if the constant fighting wasn't bad enough, my stepbrothers developed a new hobby, helping themselves to my belongings whenever I was at college. It started small. My wireless mouse disappeared one day, then my portable speaker the next. But soon they graduated to bigger targets. I came home from classes one afternoon to find my tablet missing from my desk. When I confronted Mike and Jake, they both shrugged, putting on their best innocent faces. "Haven't seen it," Mike said, not even looking up from his phone. "Nope, no idea," Jake echoed, suddenly very interested in his shoelaces. This went on for 3 days. 3 days of them playing dumb while I just knew one of them had taken it. Finally, I'd had enough. While Mike was at soccer practice, I marched into his room. The place was a disaster zone, clothes everywhere, candy wrappers stuffed between books, posters hanging crooked on the walls. I started searching methodically, going through drawers and boxes under the bed and the closet. And there it was, wrapped in one of his sweatshirts and stuffed in the back of his bottom drawer, my tablet. The battery was nearly dead, and he'd filled it with game apps and who knows what else. When he got home, the look on his face when he saw me holding the tablet was priceless. I was going to give it back, he mumbled. Like hell you were, I snapped. Stay out of my room and stay away from my things, but they didn't learn. A week later, I came home to find them both sprawled on the living room floor, my laptop between them, playing some game they'd downloaded. I snatched the laptop away, ignoring their protests. If I catch either of you touching my things again? Then came the final straw. I was walking home from campus one sunny afternoon when I saw them, a woman I'd never met before, standing with John next to my father's prized car, which had been pulled out of the garage. The car he'd loved so much, the one he'd spent weekends washing and waxing, teaching me about engines and oil changes and proper maintenance. My stomach dropped as I got closer and heard their conversation. Excellent condition, the woman was saying, walking around the car. I think it would be perfect for my commute. What's going on here? I asked, my voice sharper than I'd intended. The woman turned to me with a bright smile. Oh, hello. I'm here about the car. He listed it for sale online. I felt like someone had dumped ice water down my back. This car isn't for sale, I said firmly. It belonged to my father. John's face twisted into an ugly sneer. You should be thanking me, he spat. I actually found someone willing to buy this piece of junk. It's a woman's car anyway, no self-respecting man would be caught dead driving it. I stood there frozen as he continued his rant. Your father, he practically spat the word, clearly didn't know anything about cars. Driving around in this thing like some sort of... He waved his hand dismissively. No wonder he acted like a woman. A real man would have bought a proper car. I turned to the woman who was still hovering uncertainly near the car. I'm sorry, but you've been misled. This car is not for sale. It never was and it never will be. My voice was calm but firm. I suggest you look elsewhere. She glanced between John and me, clearly sensing the tension, then nodded and hurried away. I didn't wait to watch her leave. Instead, I got into my father's car, backed it carefully into the garage and locked the door. Then I turned to John, who was practically vibrating with rage. Give me the garage keys, now. My voice was steel. And don't ever go near my father's car again. His face contorted with fury as he yanked the keys from his pocket and threw them at my feet. They clattered against the driveway as he stormed off, cursing under his breath. That evening, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. How dare you speak to John that way, she hissed. Do you have any idea what kind of problems you're making for yourself? I slammed my glass down on the counter. Problems? You want to talk about problems? How about him trying to sell Dad's car behind my back? How about him insulting Dad's memory? He was just trying to help. That car is just sitting there. That car, I cut her off, is mine. Just like this house is mine. And I've had enough. John and his sons need to leave. I'm done with the fighting, the stealing, the disrespect. I'm done with all of it. Mom's voice rose to a shriek. You're kicking us out? Your own mother? No, Mom, not you. I took a deep breath. You can stay. You're my mother, and this was your home too. But John and the boys need to go. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Then her face hardened. If they go, I go. The words hit like physical blows, but I stood my ground. That's your choice. They were gone by the next afternoon. I watched from my window as they loaded boxes and suitcases into their cars. Mom didn't even say goodbye. After they left, I sat in Dad's study surrounded by his books and photos, trying to process everything that had happened. But one thought kept nagging at me. This wasn't over. John wasn't the type to walk away quietly. I needed help. Professional help. The next morning I called Dad's old friend and lawyer, James Wilson. He'd handled Dad's will and had always told me to contact him if I ever needed anything. This is serious, Selena, he said after I explained everything. Your mother has no legal claim to the property. Your father's will was very clear about that. But if she decides to file a lawsuit, she wouldn't. I started, but then stopped. These days I wasn't sure what Mom would do. Legal battles are expensive, James continued. Even if we win, and we would win, you'd spend a lot of money and time fighting this in court. Not to mention the emotional toll. He leaned back in his chair. My advice? Try to resolve this before it gets to that point. James's prediction proved right sooner than I expected. 2 days after our meeting, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I'm filing a lawsuit, she said without preamble, for division of property. You can't just throw us out on the street. I contacted James immediately after hanging up. Let's try mediation, he suggested. Get everyone in a room with a neutral third party. It'll be cheaper and faster than court. The mediation was set for the following week. I arrived early with James, watching his mom walked in with her lawyer and John. Of course, he couldn't stay away. James took control of the meeting immediately. Let's be clear about what we're dealing with here. He began spreading out documents on the conference table. Mr. Parker's will was ironclad. He had it drawn up by one of the best estate lawyers in the state, me. He walked them through the legal details, his voice calm but authoritative. The house, the car, everything was left to Selena. Mrs. Parker, you received a generous monthly allowance, which you're still getting. There's nothing here to dispute. Mom's lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his chair as James continued. A lawsuit would be expensive, very expensive. Selena has the resources to fight this as long as necessary. Do you? He looked directly at my mother. Are you prepared to drain your savings, possibly go into debt for a case you can't win? John jumped up. Of course she wants to continue. We're not going to let some spoiled brat. Mr. Stevens, James cut him off sharply. You're not a party to this discussion. I'm asking Mrs. Parker. In fact, I think it would be better if you waited outside. John's face turned that familiar shade of red. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the blinds rattled. In the silence that followed, I watched my mother. She looked smaller somehow, older. The fight seemed to drain out of her. The monthly allowance continues for life, James reminded her gently. That's $3,000 every month guaranteed, but legal fees could eat that up for years to come. Is that what you want? Mom looked down at her hands, then at her lawyer, who gave a slight shake of his head. No, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I don't want that. The paperwork was ready, a document acknowledging the terms of the will and waiving any future claims. Mom signed it without looking at me. Before she left, I handed her an envelope. This should cover 6 months of rent, I said, to help you get settled. She took it without a word. That was 3 months ago. The house is quiet now. Actually quiet. Not the tense silence of those last few weeks with John and the boys. I'm still in college, working toward my law degree. Dad's car sits in the garage, polished and maintained just the way he liked it. I worry about Mom sometimes. I know she still has her allowance, and if she's careful with it, she'll be comfortable. But I also know John's taste for expensive restaurants hasn't changed, and I've heard through mutual friends about their weekend trips and shopping sprees. That's her choice, though. We all make our own decisions and live with the consequences.